Hey guys, it's Emily, and you are about to listen to the most recent episode I recorded with Sofia Smallstorm. As usual, it is mostly just audio, but I left the video file as the what's playing here because there was one segment where I did show some visuals. Unfortunately, as I'm working on the recording, I noticed that our volume levels are very different, and it did not sound like that to me or Laura when we recorded it. And I tried to fix it, but I don't have the skills to do it. And in the end, I just wasn't able to. So there is a pretty big difference between my volume level and Sophia's. My apologies. I know that that's not ideal, but that is what it is. And that's all. Okay, so enjoy the show. And I hope everyone's having a lovely weekend. All right, bye-bye. Here we go, Sofia Smallstorm. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic. No video today, which means I don't have to wear makeup. I don't have to get dressed up, and everyone knows what that means. One of our favorites, Sofia Smallstorm, is back with me. Sofia, my friend, it's been a little while. How are you doing?
I'm returning triumphantly.
You are. You are.
Yes, to your show.
Yeah, I have to tell you, and I've told you this before, but it never ceases to amaze me. The people who love you the absolute most, and there's a lot of them. You know, there's one person on YouTube who, like, on every, like, not every video, but like, I'll have a show that I think is like fantastically interesting with somebody other than you. Not that the ones I don't do with you aren't fantastically interesting, right? But the comment, there's this one person that will write something like, Sofia Smallstorm is the most interesting person on the internet. You should interview her again, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, I wish I knew those people, Emily.
And also, I'd say that, you know, there's been a couple of the shows you and I have done that have been disappeared from the internet, either based on YouTube scenario or when my account was deleted from Vimeo. And I get the most amount of requests for people who are wanting to, if there's any way I can transfer them the original file or something, because it's not available on the internet and I haven't uploaded it in too many backup places or whatever, people requesting segments that they heard once 2 years ago and now they can't find again. So congratulations to you for being so in demand by the most discerning of listeners.
Well, I'm actually very honored that that is the case. And thank you to all of you who think I'm that great, because it boosts my confidence, because I wasn't raised to believe I was any great shakes, all right? No, I was raised to believe I was a humble near failure. Yes.
Well, that's almost impossible to believe, because you're brilliant and you're fairly achieved and accomplished, although it's in a more quiet way than often people with some of your kind of background, make it. But you have a very interesting mind, and like early on, in your sort of alternative media rise, like you were the person who explained very complex topics to us. Most of them were somewhat dystopic and demoralizing, right? And so, okay, you're a genius, you're a great researcher and able to explain it, but like most of this is bad news. But as I've become more and more familiar with your writings in your newsletter over the last couple of years, when you started sharing them with me, because I hadn't been a subscriber before that, you have a very playful mind as well. You like to dance back and forth between topics, seeing interconnectedness and sort of, the back and forth in ways that not everybody would, but makes good sense in the way that you present them. And a lot of the topics that you cover in the newsletters are, more, I don't know if I would say like more lighthearted, but not so like the end is nigh dystopic, or if they are, they're from a completely different like set than most people in the alternative media usually pay attention to. So it's eye-opening in a different way. So I've really enjoyed the process of like getting to know your mind more completely. And then of course I have the luxury of actually knowing you in real life. And that's always, more interesting than just knowing someone on the internet, and to sort of find all the nooks and crannies and hidden rooms and in sort of someone's mind and life and whatever. I love that. But your newsletter actually captures that all really well. So I'm always glad to share.
And my magnesium cocktail that I gave you.
Oh, yes. The magnesium cocktail that did taste like ginger, which I like, right? It's hard to entice me into a cocktail that doesn't include bourbon or mezcal. But if there's ginger in there, then I'm game, right?
We're going to do a little plug for the ionic magnesium on this show so people can make that. It's not alcoholic, but I'm telling you, this is the nicest pick-me-upper, and you sleep really well that night if you drink a magnesium cocktail that I just, by some total fluke, figured out how to make. So before we end the show, I'm going to force people to listen to the whole first hour, and I'll give the recipe then, and it's very easy. And then in the second hour at the end, I'll give it again.
All right. So this is now Conspiracy Cocktail with Sofia Smallstorm, right? So I don't know if you know this, Sofia, but I do have an online speakeasy called Conspiracy Cocktail. Right. So we did it during the lockdown. We did it every weekend. Now we just do it once every few months. And it's an unrecorded sort of like, dark into the bar kind of speakeasy conversation. And I also give people like a mixology recipe, and people come with their drinks and we like pretend we're in a bar chatting, right? It's fun. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we've had as many as 60 people show up and to listen to the debauchery. And some of the most interesting conversations I've ever had have come out of that. But I didn't know we'd be doing a Monday afternoon episode, or I would have prepared.
Well, it's only us and perhaps Laura, if she's there. Are you there, Laura?
I'm here. Let's not forget our minders at Zoom, who complicate every morning for you.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So where do you want to start? This newsletter, March, April 2022, was kind of the terrain we decided on, but that newsletter really zigzags in all directions.
So I like it. Because I'm not good at keeping up with my mail, I was under the impression that this was the most recent one, because I know you had taken a little bit of break from your usual production. So I like the zigging and zagging and connecting all of these sort of disparate things. It's what my podcast mate and myself call playing the glass bead game, right? Finding the sort of interconnectedness of all things. But, the whole thing was really good. I really liked this sort of way you started with these gentlemen in the war prison, and how they sort of made serious lemonade out of the lemons they had been handed, and then tied everything. You went on to talk about a variety of different topics, including, complete and total mind control by television, the pyramid economy, poison plants that, people get fooled by, all kinds of stuff. But each time it was sort of like you started with that story, and then you told 4 or 5 other stories and looked at it through the lens of the story you had originally started with, right? So maybe let's start there, and then we'll decide where to go.
Okay, and so I'm going to throw out the word that's really key to this newsletter, the concept of your lifeblood and your lifeblood energy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the central piece of this newsletter, I think. But just to connect that concept to the book, I found this book very old, from the 1950s, 1953. In fact, that publishing company, Lippincott, has now disappeared. And it was called The Colditz Story. And this was a memoir written by Patrick Reed. He was a British Army captain, and he and other officers were taken into captivity by the Germans around in the 1940s. And they were kept at this very forbidding stone structure called Colditz Castle. And it is really, you can look for pictures of it on the internet. It's the most classic looking, to be entombed somewhere in a giant, like a haunted castle made of stone in Europe, surrounded by a moat. The Germans considered it escape-proof. It was specially engineered by their military. It was this high security POW camp, and only officers were put there. And they were people who came from all different European countries. So once you were kept at Colditz Castle, imprisoned, you met officers from Poland, officers from France, from Australia, from Canada. And these guys, I mean, they must have all been really smart. I was surprised at how many skills they had, which they managed to parlay into really functional escape making techniques, because all these guys did was plot how to escape out of this place. And a pair or 3 or 4 of them would hatch an escape plan at any given time. And the entire collection of prisoners from all different nationalities would contribute their skills to making what was necessary to get out of here. And there is a movie about this that was made in the 1950s. And that never did well in America, but you can Google it. It's called The Colditz Story, 1955. I see the picture there, Emily, as you're sharing your screen.
Apparently there was a TV series as well, maybe?
Yes, that could have been. But the story, the ingenuity. So I'll just tell you, some of these people had actual successful escapes, but most of them were captured and returned back. But did that faze them? No, they simply bounded into creating another plan. And these guys, you would never think that men had this range of skills: knitting and sewing, dyeing fabrics, brewing and distilling alcohol, wig making, button making, compass making. Somebody even created a typewriter in this prison that you could disassemble into these unrecognizable pieces of wood, and only the letters attached to the arms had to be concealed. They had all kinds of hiding places, and they constantly made the most amazing costumes for themselves so they could kind of escape incognito. And they dug, the digging, the tunneling. They worked at tunnels for weeks. They worked till midnight, all night. They were never tired. And their diet, which absolutely stuns me, was like boiled turnips and potatoes, and not much of that either. And they, these people were undefeatable in spirit. And that is what we're missing today. So their lifeblood energy, meaning anything they had left over to put into creativity, was used in this very creative way. What do we do with our lifeblood energy, Emily? We sit around, we, twiddle our phones, and we look for entertainment. We don't do amazingly productive, creative things. We don't dream up something either tangible or intangible. There are very few of us who do this anymore.
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first thoughts are, well, it's interesting to look at all the visuals of that, but you have kind of I don't know how much looking into general jailhouse or prison activities you've done. But if anyone has ever known somebody who's been in jail or prison, more prison than jail, or anyone has watched Orange is the New Black, or Bird on a Wire, or some of these, or seen the Shawshank Redemption or anything like that. Like, we're aware of, that there is a prison economy, that people will come up with all sorts of creative ways to get drunk or fashion some tool or get something snuck into them or try and create an escape hatch. The difference, I think, there's 2 things going on here, right? So the people that were in this particular prison were prisoners of war, which means they were probably mostly military people, as opposed to what we think of as criminals. Now, you and I might think that people who are in the military are closer to criminals than they are to helpful. But, generally when people join the military, they think that they are doing so for the good of the broader range of people, all of that kind of stuff. So the mindset is a little bit different than someone who is in jail or prison for, money laundering or drugs or rape or murder or whatever. The creativity exists in both places on a certain level, but the intention or the source of the creativity in this particular case was much different than in similar scenarios, right? These were people who, they weren't for all practical purposes, quote unquote, criminals. And so they're not looking to just strictly benefit themselves. They have that mindset of the group and whatnot in a different way than the regular, jailhouse economy tends to promote. And then the other thing is, and this is like, the more I think about this, this is a bind for all of us. They don't have the internet. They don't have television. And we're going to get into these things as part of the later conversation from this newsletter. But we all are hearing increasing amounts of propaganda or media these days warning us of a grid failure or a nuke or whatever. And, people are like convinced that life will become very difficult, very challenging, if not impossible, if we don't have the internet. And in my head, it's like, well, wait a second. Like, actually, this is not me promoting the idea of let's lose the internet, but what that would suddenly do is free up a bunch of time and a bunch of space in our minds for other things that we have not been doing, maybe things we used to enjoy as children or things we do in our small amount of spare time that could then become more priorities, but also, unaddict us from something that we've become very addicted to, right? So that circumstance that they were in, right? People who were sort of a unique mindset, being there and being able to do this, I think it's definitely an interesting story. I'm curious to check out. It looks like they've re-released this book, or at least some iteration or retelling of it through a variety of other arms or whatever. But it does look interesting. And I do think there was a TV series. So that's kind of what pops to mind immediately, right? I mean, I don't know how much looking into prison economy you've done or prison activities, but that's where I went with it. It was a unique set of people, right?
Now, Emily, you are sadly behind on my newsletters, and I'm going to scold you a little tiny bit. You need to hire some rabbits and have them help you dig around for my latest newsletter, which I did send you, because it is all about the American prison system and how it evolved.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think to have you back sooner rather than later then.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that that's where you went immediately?
Yeah.
And here I am going, wow, I wish she could find that newsletter. But I have to say this, everybody in America should look around your neighborhoods. And if the people in your neighborhood haven't done this, you can do it yourself. But set up a little birdhouse kind of a thing on your block, and put books in it that you've read, because I'm a horrible magpie. Anytime I pass one of these, it doesn't matter whether it's my neighborhood or another neighborhood, I always take a peek into these little free library things. And usually it's awful romances and, humor and stuff that I don't really want to spend time on, but I have found the most amazing books. And I found this 1953 J.P. Lippincott book, The Colditz Story, in one of those little book birdhouses, and I grabbed it. And then I found a book called American Prison by Shane Bauer in another one, and read that and wrote a newsletter about it. So I have to say, these little libraries are furnishing the content for my newsletters. It's kind of amazing. But yes, somebody sent me a book which I read right after this Colditz thing, and it was called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And it was also an older book, I mean, by our standards. It was published in 1978. And the guy who wrote it, I thought this was a pseudonym, Jerry Mander, Jerrymander. Turns out that is his real name. And he was an advertising executive at a very successful San Francisco ad agency called Freeman Mander and Gosage. And he found out early in his career that television, not only was it a powerful medium, it could tweak people's minds. It could get them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And that's what advertising really was to get you to get off your butt and go and buy something, spend money on this thing that you wouldn't probably get under normal circumstances. And so he said, this is not a neutral technology. This is a manipulative technology that he became very good at using, prided himself on it. And he also, because he was kind of one of these liberals, with a do-gooder liberal.
Right, my favorite.
He did a lot of free publicity for good causes, like let's just pull one out of a hat, Sierra Club or something. And he found that the good cause publicity that he was doing and spending all kinds of firm agency time and money on for pro bono, this was in direct conflict with the big companies who paid him to do their advertising, like, oil and gas companies and technology companies. And so all the things that we perceive now, having had some perspective on this, that are ruining our world, are in direct opposition to the things we want to do and the people we want to help who are trying to save our world. And so the more do-gooder publicity work he did, the more his paying clients were slamming him and saying, what are you doing this for? So he found that he was in a very peculiar teeter-totter and not serving his own interests well. And he says something in the book which really stuck with me. He says that whatever we see on television or hear has been processed for us. It is not real. When you watch a program on Discovery Channel about whatever, Black Widow spiders or rattlesnakes or sharks or something. Actually, it's Shark Week. I think I missed the.
I love Shark Week.
I know. What are we doing? We shouldn't admit it. But anyway,
Isn't it the last week of July? Maybe it starts today.
I saw a plane going over the beach with a huge banner, and that was like Friday. So I figured it must start really soon.
Yeah, I think it's the last week of July. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
Back and forth between the tennis and the Sharks this week.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever you see, he says this, whatever we see, hear, touch, taste, smell, feel, and understand about the world has been processed for us, unless we have direct experience, all right? So our experiences of the world in general, what we read about, what we see on television, what somebody tells us about, is not direct or primary. These are secondary mediated experiences. And he says, even if, let's say, 200 million people in America are sitting in their living rooms watching television, all different channels, and learning all different things that they think is real. They think a program, look, Shark Week, sometimes it makes me want to puke. It's so stupid and it's so contrived. And I know that sharks aren't like that. And they try so hard, the producers, to make the program really exciting and to make us really afraid. But we are listening to processed material. This is mediated, processed material for us to consume. And so he says in his book that the whole nation sitting in front of television, watching all different channels, is really gathered at a gigantic 3-ring circus. Those who watch the bicycle act believe their experience is different from those who watch the gorillas or the flame eater at a circus, but you're all at the circus.
Right.
And even if you're watching from separate living rooms, you are basically not able to exchange any responses to any other people apart from some family member who happens to be watching with you or friend. but you're alone in this engagement with this processed, mediated, prefabbed material, and all you're having, along with all your countrymen, is a screen experience. That's it. That's the only real-time experience you're having. A screen experience of stuff that is likely doctored, faked up for you, right?
Yep.
And this was 1978.
Okay. So there's a couple things you said that I want to hit on. First of all, to your point about the little birdhouse book libraries, the little neighborhood libraries, I like them a lot too. I don't always take something, but I always like to look what's in there, right? And some of them are very cute the way they've been designed as well and whatnot. But one of the things I've noticed when I look in them is there's almost always at least one or two sort of conspiratorial or like questioning of the narrative types of books in there, right? Which should give people some comfort that like there's someone else in their neighborhood who's at least like willing to consider their perspective, right? So if the shit hits the fan, maybe you'll be able to find one other soldier, right? But I do like those as well. I think they're pretty cool. And then you said, when you got to talking about Shark Week, right? I have to ask you this quick question. Which is the scariest shark they've ever presented you? Did you ever see the one called Submarine? Did you ever see the Tales of the Shark called Submarine?
I don't remember, Emily, because I don't take that show seriously. I actually have a friend who is a famous shark attack specialist, and I look for him on Shark Week. He's usually on.
There was this they were covering for a while that I think was showing up quite a bit in South Africa that they had named Submarine, and that stuff was huge, dude. Right? I went through a phase of being interested in Shark Week. I haven't watched in several years, but when I used to have expanded time because of drug use or whatever, I watched a lot of things like Shark Week, right? So
yeah. Well, there are bits of credible material in Shark Week, and you can learn some things. But I started studying sharks. This is an aside because we had a fatal shark attack here in San Diego, the first in 50 years. And it was on my birthday at my beach involving my friends. So 2008, Dave Martin, a veterinarian who was in his 60s, was taken out by a very large female shark at about 7:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it was misreported on the news as a mistaken identity attack, shark, but it wasn't. It was a territorial attack with intent to kill. And there was a reason for that. And I went deep into this because of anyone probably alive, I had swum, that's the correct tense of the word, more miles at that beach in that ocean than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't about to abandon my beach, right? So I had to find out why and how this happened, which is how I ended up getting to know the shark attack specialist, Ralph Collier. And he taught me so much about sharks and shark attacks. And it completely changed my orientation toward the ocean, and I felt much more secure because we all live with a very primal fear of deep, dark water and things that swim in the water beneath us and might come and get us, right? And apparently the man-eating fish concept was new for people. They didn't even know for all the hundreds and thousands of years that people sailed the ocean in these tiny little rafts, in primitive days. It was only when they had bigger ships that they were able to deduce somehow from evidence that there were huge fish in the water, in the ocean, huge. The one that attacked Dave Martin had a 22-inch jaw, right? That's the width of the jaw. So anyway, the shared experience of television being all that we're really having. And that relates to the use of these phones, these scrying mirrors, as some people call them.
Hold on one second, Sophia. Just real quick. I'm going to let's pin for a second. I don't know if you've ever done a show about sharks, but what you were talking about was interesting, and that might be interesting for the future, right? I wanted to wanted to respond to your friend Jerry Mander and his observations about television and processing and programming and whatnot. Sure, like we can watch a variety of different things on the television, but there's very little talk, even though people have known this for a long time, about the things that television does that mimic like what the retina and the eye does, right? Mm-hmm. And so regardless of what you're watching, let's push that aside for a second. When you're watching something that is mimicking what your eye naturally does, my guess would be that there's a level of confusion being created that is making it increasingly difficult for people to perceive the difference between an experience that they take in their own, quote, real life and something that they have observed or watched on the television. Have you ever had that moment where like you're telling a story or you're recalling something, and for 1 second, you aren't sure if you're not confusing something with something you saw on television?
Emily, I haven't had that problem, no.
Okay, so I think this is I think this is something that we all need to consider, not just for television, but for anything that comes in through a screen, right? If you even look at your computer, if you have a newer computer or a newer phone, it'll say something like retinal display, right? As to like some sort of technology that makes the visual the clarity of the visuals better or whatever, right? So I think that we're losing, remember like back in the like 60s or the 70s, like you knew when you were watching television because of how grainy it looked, right? When you were in real life. Now, like I've had conversations with people, as the TVs have gotten better and better, that line has blurred, and especially as sometimes what you're seeing on television is with more definition than what you see in real life. Like, have you ever seen like one of the shows in high definition where you can see like every pore on a person's face and it's almost disturbing?
Well, yeah, this is pertinent to cinema as well. When we go and see the big screen and you see a close-up of Tom Cruise's face and you can practically see the nose hairs. It's called nose hair tight proximity. This is bigger than life. I mean, when would you ever be that close to anybody and have them be that big? Right.
So I think there's been some scrambling of whatever the mechanisms of the human mind have been throughout the course of history to help us differentiate between that which is real and that which is not. And I don't think that would be accidental either. So, and then what he said about everything that, or I'm not sure if he said it or this was just your conclusion from the things that he said, that everything that has been delivered through the screen was processed. It's very similar as to like what they've done with like pasteurization, with milk and fruit juices and things like that, right? It's like the difference between going to the Amish farm and getting the raw milk with all the enzymes and all of that kind of stuff, or getting whatever they give you in a carton that has all kinds of questionable chemicals on it in the grocery store, right? It's like that same process of like sifting out the parts that are best for you, putting things in there that aren't good for you, and like delivering a standardized product. And like with the television, like what we said, like regardless, everything that is coming through a screen in a box is on some level propaganda. It's all processed. It doesn't even really matter, although sometimes it matters more than others, what the content you're looking at is, right? That was your thing with the three-ring circus, right? Like same thing said with like these enormous music festivals they have, right? Like one would think that better mind control could be applied if you had everybody in the same room or on the same stage, watching the same thing, listening to the same thing. Why would they make these festivals where there's 16 different stages? Actually, I think what we're talking about, having 3 rings or 400 channels or 16 stages actually delivers more proficient mind control, because then people can select exactly what appeals to them. And so their attention will be drawn longer, right? And it's not the content so much that is doing the programming as it is the medium which the message is being relayed on. And this takes us to Marshall Mcluhan, which I don't know if you've ever done a deep dive on him, but he was the medium is the message person. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right.
But I haven't done a deep dive, no.
He's a fascinating person, and there's people who think he's part of the problem. There's people who think he's part of the solution. I think it's a mixed bag, which is the case with a lot of things, right? But his whole point was it didn't actually matter what you were listening on the radio. It mattered that you were listening to the radio.
Yes, exactly.
And that all these things that we receive information across are doing more to change our minds and our brains and our bodies and all that kind of stuff than any of the information or data that is being sent through, right? It's the actual mechanism of how your body and your mind receives this and processes it. That is the programming, not the actual information in the story.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, in a sense, you know, we're hardwired to learn through secondary experience, because this is, our parents tell us things, our elders tell us things, friends tell us things, and that secondary experience expands our understanding of the world. So we didn't have technologies thousands of years ago. We had to learn from the secondary experience of listening to somebody else tell about their primary experience, right?
Yeah. I want to ask you
different.
I want to ask you something, because you're a person who uses, without becoming like a Luddite to the point that you're not functional in modern society, you don't use a lot of the technologies and conveniences that many of the rest of us use, right? You're very selective and intentional in which technologies you use, how you use them, and all of that kind of stuff, right? You know, you had a little bit of time off recently where things were more focused on something else. Did you notice any difference with paying even less attention to technology than you normally would from that experience? Or for you, do you think that that there wasn't much difference, right? Like if I go to a place where there's no cell phone reception, I notice a huge difference in my psychological state, in my relationship with time, in what my attention is focused on, right? But I use a lot more of that super updated technology, not because I love it, but just because of, you know, convenience, and it makes you fall in love with it, even if you think you don't. You don't. So when one steps away even a little bit that way, I'm wondering if it's less noticeable to you than it is a little bit to someone like me. What do you think about that?
Well, the technologies I use copiously, like the computer, but mine is wired. That's the difference. And
Right.
I use the phone copiously, but it's a landline. It's not cell phone. So in that regard, nothing really changed for me.
Yeah.
So again, I am very aware of the fact that these technologies are hijacking us. And for people who fear 5G, sometimes I say, it's not very nice of me, but I say, look, you know, you're the people who used up 3G and 4G, supposedly, and we've run out of space on that part of the spectrum. Now we have to go to millimeter waves. I mean, if you didn't use your cell phone except once a year when your car broke down, you know, and you sat and used your wired computer, this would all be different.
Right.
But I can't stop a herd of buffalo. And the people of the world have been the herd of buffaloes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is something, I have to tell this story, and we're digressing from my newsletter, but I don't care.
It's very interesting. That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
I posted on my blog a while back, and I'll dig it up if you want. But it was kind of like an unlisted video or a private home video. We all know Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Yes. And her sisters are married to these 2 men who one of them was in some kind of IMF
Israeli, right?
company.
like British guys who are part of British and Israeli intelligence, or Israeli guys or something like that, right?
Well, they're South African. One of them is South African, and the Maxwell sisters have that sort of European, semi-British, quasi-British um, affect. But
Okay.
anyway, it was a sort of an at-home, down-home discussion about what one of the men in the video, was two men and two women. The women were the Maxwell sisters, the older sisters. So the one of the men, he was in Africa, on behalf of his economic hitman company,
Mm-hmm.
and the plan was to bring clean piped water to these African villages. Now, the villagers had, for eons, traditionally, they had walked miles, hours a day, 5 hours a day, to fetch water in some kind of earthen gourd or something that they carried on their head. It was primarily the women who went to fetch water, of course.
Yeah.
And they would bring back like a gallon of water, walk hours to get it, and hours back. And they did this every day. And they didn't mind, because survival, when your survival needs are met in 5 minutes because you have taps in your house and you have a grocery store to go to and you eat packaged prepared food, then you have what's left over is this lifeblood energy concept that we're going to get into in a bit. So what these people did with their lifeblood energy was they walked miles to pick up water and bring it back for their use. So the economic hitman company came in and said, no, we're going to bring you water. It's clean water. It's the best water you could have. And here it is. It's coming out of this pipe. Now you need to drink this water and use it to clean your dishes and your clothes and everything. Don't bother about going miles to fetch one little pitcher of water. You have it here. So the Africans hated this clean piped water. Why did they hate it? Because it had no taste. They thought it was awful. In fact, they were so tuned in to the biome of the water they drank that if they took the smallest sip of water that they had fetched, any one of them could tell which pond it came from, no matter how far away these ponds and streams and little water reservoirs were. So they didn't want this clean water. Disgusting. This is no good. It doesn't taste of anything. So they refused to drink it, but they were willing to start washing their dishes in it and trying to rinse some clothing in it, even though those were not really high priorities of theirs.
Right.
But they did dig their heels in on the concept of paying for the water. They were absolutely not going to pay for this disgusting water. So how did they get to where they paid for the water? This is the interesting turn that the story takes. They were next introduced to cell phones. And my gosh, they fell for the cell phone like lightning. They loved it. Now they could talk to each other in the next village or wherever, however far away. And they loved their cell phone so much that they were willing to pay for cell phone service with the little money they had. And likely this service was greatly subsidized, right?
Yeah.
And when, as of the time they agreed to pay for the cell phones, they then agreed to pay for the water.
Something about that made them accept the other.
Yes.
Well, there's two things. I have a couple of responses to that. That is an interesting story, right? The idea that they were so tuned into the biome and they could literally sense every bit of mineral or algae or whatever that was in there, right? And that was sort of in communication with their bodies in a way that, they wanted to keep intact, even if they didn't understand it that way, is fascinating. And it sort of reminds me, like, when you, like, whether it's music you like, or let's just even go with the ecosystem that we all know each other from here, which is like YouTube and podcasts or whatever, right? Like, when you're listening to a video that is information dense and personable, and maybe it can be entertaining too, and whatnot, right? And then YouTube will recommend to you, based on the algorithm or somebody's good use of search engine optimization or whatever, some video that has like all the right things in the title, but you can listen for 10 minutes and there's been like nada there. It's like nothing, right? It's like not information dense at all, and like become very rejectful of it. So it's that same kind of idea. But what I'm curious about is if the cell phone actually started to damage their own personal biome enough that they could no longer sense the difference. And that was part of the immediate switch. That suddenly it isn't just, okay, the technology reprogrammed our brain because now we're taking in pictures through the screen and we like that. We want to have more time to do that. Although I'm sure there may have been some of that, right? That seems to be the most effective technology is the cell phone, especially like if it's a smart one that includes video and all that kind of stuff. But I'm curious about the cell damage, biome damage coming from the radiation of the phone, and if just that little bit, right, created enough of a separation in their ability to well detect the difference that it was like, amputating a leg.
Very good question, Emily, which I'm not able to answer, but that's an excellent question. Biome is so strange that I heard this from somebody really reputable, somebody on the level of Zach Bush, some, extremely credentialed scientist who is familiar with biome. If you have, let's say, a sudden influx of really bad news, let's say somebody you really care about, you hear that they're dead, boom, gone now. Your good bacteria in your gut biome will keel over and die instantly. Huge volumes of good bacteria will just perish right there with the bad news arrival. So yeah, and so then the bad bacteria go, oh, yippee, now we can get going, we can have a party. So this is why it's bad to wallow in ugly things, bad, sad, gloom, doom, because it doesn't help the colonies, the quality of bacteria inside you.
That's interesting. It makes you wonder right now, right? People just had this year, 2 years, right, of being scared, people sick, people dying, whatever, I'm not going to get into the nuances of the veracity of the truth of that, but people have been traumatized and made fearful and depressed and anxious and all that kind of stuff, right? And then the very next thing that comes after that, heat wave, food shortage, all of that kind of stuff, right? So damage the biome, and then when it's time to sort of repopulate or refill it or whatever, it's garbage pickings.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a factor, that your good bacteria and your gut biome had that level of response to traumatic or disturbing or upsetting input or information. We know that that's true, and it has input of bad food. But if we look at information and food in a similar way, which we do when we think about programming and mind control and stuff like that, then that would make sense. So it's, should have thought of that before. And I liked your, just rolling back a bit, I liked your response to people coming to you fearful of 5G, right? And sometimes people are almost like demanding a solution from you. Like we all get that from people who listen to us talk about these kinds of things and all the possibilities, like this sort of insistence or a demand on like some sort of device or thing to prevent it, or some solution that they think we must have that they don't, that we're keeping from them or something, right? And I like your response that you ate up all the 3 and 4G, and so you actually caused this. Like I had never thought about it that way, but that really is a way to look at it, right? And it's funny how that one particular number created a panic like magnitudes of order higher than any of the previous numbered G's.
Yes, exactly. And we're told millimeter waves, there's closer to ionizing radiation, and it 60 gigahertz uses up or it impairs the oxygen uptake of the body on the level of hemoglobin. Yeah, but these microwaves are just as bad. Our body is attuned to 7 to 12 hertz. So what is the difference between being hit by a sledgehammer or a Mack truck?
Right. Yeah, but like we're not talking about tiny little, tapper hammers anymore. Either way. So, but that is an interesting way to look at it. There was something else you said in there that made me have a thought. I think I've lost it though. That was kind of an interesting thought. But let's do this. Let's set up where we want to go in the second hour with kind of what we wrap up here in the first segment. And you had brought up lifeblood, as sort of the binding principle of the entirety of this new newsletter. Do you want to give a little sort of description of that from the sort of pyramid scenario? How do you want to set that up so we can really focus on that in the second hour?
All right. Well, somebody sent me a book out of the blue called The Greatest Lies Ever Told. His name is Eugene Scott, and you cannot find this book on the internet. His wife sells it on her website. She's an herbalist in the Northeast, and she's a very good herbalist. And if you look for Berry, the name Berry, herbalist Charity Berry, you will find under the books tab this particular book. So I started to read it and I thought, this is it's not like a skilled writer, but it's very good raw thinking here. And he begins with this pyramid chart, and he shows that at the top of the pyramid, these are the elites, the trillionaires, and then he goes down to the lowest classes of people at the bottom of the pyramid, and all the levels in between. And the top 3 levels of the pyramid that include like the media and executives, very powerful executives, the people in the CFR and whatever, Trilateral Commission, and then the very top people who run the world, they are obscured. So there's effectively like a cloud layer at the top of the pyramid. And the people who live in the world at the bottom of the pyramids, who are slogging away using their lifeblood energy to create, to produce, and all of the things they produce are sold and traded by the people in the upper layers of the pyramid. And those people accrue enormous amounts of wealth by sucking the output of the lifeblood energy of the people at the bottom of the pyramid. So he then goes into animals, and he tells us that animals spend a lot of their time, a lot of their lifeblood energy meeting their needs for, food, shelter, and whatnot. And when they relax, which is rare, they sleep. Maybe they frolic a little bit. But human beings, especially with our more advanced, organized societies, whatever role we play in the society, our lifeblood needs life needs are met, our survival needs are met quickly, and then we have time and energy left over. So in the old days, a man with his time and energy left over would perhaps build another cabin or some shed in which he could store the food that he was farming, or share it with other people. And so humans have leftover lifeblood energy that they can spend on creative ideas. And tomorrow brings more extra time and the possibility to try more creative ideas. So this concept of what we do with our lifeblood, and that today, how much money you have represents how much extra lifeblood you have left over. We store it in money. The lifeblood that I haven't used up is in my bank account, the lifeblood energy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So this concept relates to soft slavery, currency. Money is currency. It's a manipulation tool. And we are led to believe that these worthless pieces of paper actually represent something tangible that we could have. We spend our extra accrued lifeblood energy through these pieces of paper. So it gets a little more complex, and I don't want to jam up the last part of this hour with that, but we're going to talk about this in the next hour. And before you cut off the first hour, I have to give my magnesium cocktail.
Give your magnesium cocktail and then tell people what you have going on and where they can find you.
Okay, so on my store website, Avatar, AVATAR, it has nothing to do with screen avatars or anything. Avatarproducts.com. There is on the health page ionic magnesium. It's a nice big bottle, and I hated this stuff because it was sour, and you were supposed to put a dropper full in a little bit of water and drink it before you go to bed and forget about it. I couldn't do it. So then one day I poured some lime flavored seltzer over a couple of ice cubes into a glass. I put a dropper full of the magnesium, ionic magnesium from my store, and I added a drop of stevia. And my God, was that good. And then when Emily and Laura came to visit me, I gave some to Emily and she liked it too. So this is an easy way to get oral magnesium. And I believe this is some kind of buffered magnesium, so it doesn't give you the runs, and you can drink a lot of these cocktails.
Some people take it to give them the runs because they can't poop, right? So
a lot of people do take that, yes. But you need magnesium. It is the dominant ion in the cells. Magnesium deacidifies your blood. If you buy magnesium products from me, I give you a flyer that explains all this. But the cocktail, especially since we're not even at the end of July, and it's going to be hot for a couple more months, you got to try it. So lime or lemon seltzer, a couple of ice cubes, a dropper full of magnesium, ionic magnesium in this liquid form, and 1 drop of stevia, or as Emily recommended, monk fruit.
Yes, I don't know. The only thing I can think of about where the ginger I was tasting may have come from is that some people think that stevia has like an anise taste to it or a funny taste, and I don't do too much stevia anymore, so maybe I tasted whatever that was more strongly, but it tasted kind of gingery to me. But Sophia, in telling the story, you have revealed the true motive behind giving me that cocktail when I came to visit you. Because you didn't give it to me before bed. You gave it to me in the middle of the afternoon. So you were,
that's when you came over.
Put me to sleep, dude.
No, I drink it in the middle of the afternoon myself. But the instructions on the bottle by the manufacturer tell you to take this stuff before bed because it helps you to sleep. And I also want to make another plug. There is a book I put on the front page of my store, Avatar Products. This book is titled One with the One. And it is an inspirational story. And I have to say, it's one of the best I've ever read. I know the author. I've been talking to her. I want to promote this book. So if you're at all interested in these kinds of journeys, read about it on the front page. And I just sent it to another woman who wants to interview this author on her radio show. And she said, this is one of the most phenomenal books she's ever read. So there.
All right, very good. I was just teasing, Sophia, because
yes, that's okay.
I think there's plenty of people in the audience that are like, I like Emily, but if she could just take it down a notch, it would be even better. And right. So, all right. You guys can find Sophia at Avatar Products. You can also find her at are we doing is the actual
SofiaSmallstorm.com.
Okay. Sometimes I think about the sky, about the sky.
It's the same. It's the same.
Okay. So you can find her there. Guys, sign up for her newsletter. You can get it the old fashioned way, which I think is like, I look forward to reading it on the papers. I enjoy that. There's so few things we get to read on the papers anymore. So sign up for that. It's always an interesting sort of winding road and intellectual exercise. We're going to move over to the supporters segment. You can go to patreon.com/offplanetmedia. emilymoyer.locals.com or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer to hear the rest. We will see you over there. Bye-bye.